All right, so just to get started, I just want to do a quick show of hands. How many of you are approaching the final leg of your undergrad career right now? Any juniors, any seniors? Okay, all right, a lot of you guys. Well, first and foremost, congratulations. This is a huge, huge accomplishment. You guys should all feel extremely proud of yourselves. I know there's a lot of advice coming in right now based around getting ready for student loans, interview etiquette, getting your resume together. So logistically, you're in a pretty good position right now, right? But personally, I feel as though there's not enough conversation around the mental and emotional challenges one faces during this undergrad to postgrad transitional period. See, I graduated in December of 2017, and soon after I felt myself feeling like I was falling behind my peers in a way. A lot of them already had full-time jobs lined up after graduation, while I was still trying to figure out what my full-time job was going to be. And even after securing my full-time gig, I found myself struggling trying to maintain that work and social life balance that so many of us strive for. Just trying to find time in an exhausting 40-hour work week to spend time with friends I used to see every other day in the student center. Things felt like they were becoming monotonous very quickly. I found myself drained at the end of every weekday, just counting down the hours until Friday afternoon would arrive. So throughout the whole first year of my postgrad career, I found myself constantly thinking, was nobody going to warn me about this? So today, I'd like to use this opportunity to provide a realistic firsthand look at what might be coming down the pipeline for you all, as well as some tips on how to navigate these potential obstacles. I'll be recounting my first year as an alumni and talking about the 3 biggest lessons I learned along the way. Starting with lesson number 1, be patient within your job search. Now, a lot of us tend to follow this unspoken timeline based around graduating in 4 years and getting a job immediately after. And many of us get discouraged when things don't seem to go as planned. It's important to remember that everybody's journey to success is different, as cliche as that might sound. A recent report from the New York Times states that only about 36% of graduates who leave with their bachelor's degree earned it within 4 years. Of course, I was one of the lucky 64% who got to tack on an extra summer semester to an already taxing 4 years as a marketing major. So during the summer of 2017, I found myself driving for Uber part-time while trying to finish up my last few credits, all while frantically searching for a job within my field. I even hung up this sign in the back of my car, just on the off chance that maybe I'd pick up somebody who might lead to a connection that would then lead to a job opportunity. Now, weeks began to pass, and I still wasn't hearing back about any interviews, still wasn't booking any calls, and after a while, logging onto Twitter and seeing all of these job announcement posts from my peers was starting to get a little bit discouraging. You know, even though I was excited and happy for their success, I honestly started to feel like I was falling behind a little bit. Now, one day I picked up a passenger heading from the suburbs into the city for about a 40-minute Uber ride. It started off with the usual Uber passenger banter. You know, how long have you been driving for Uber? Do you drive for Lyft as well? Has it been busy today? But eventually the conversation shifted to my personal life, and I told him that I was a marketing major, just finishing up my credits, trying to figure out what my next moves were going to be. Coincidentally, it turned out he worked for a big-name pharmaceutical company right in the middle of Center City. He gave me my business card, he asked me to send over my resume just in case, and long story short, my 1-year anniversary at the company was this past February. Well, so I say all this to say that everybody's journey to success is different, and it's really important to remember that if you find yourself making those comparisons between yourself and your peers. If you have to add on an extra semester of courses, or you haven't figured out what your moves are going to be directly out of college, just remember to be patient. Just do not worry, stay calm. I promise there's opportunity available for everybody. Now, moving on to lesson number 2, continue to pursue your passions. This is something I'm sure anybody in this room who's worked a 40-hour work week job can identify with in some way, shape, or form. After college, making that segue from a schedule consisting of various activities, jobs, classes, and events to a single 40-hour work week job can be extremely jarring, and it's easy for this routine to become monotonous for some. Like many others, I grew up around a lot of adults who stayed at their first working opportunity for their entire working lives. That's 30, 40, even 50 years at the same company. Back in the day, the priority going into the job force used to be stability and stability alone, but we're currently growing up in an era in which the conversation is beginning to shift a little bit. A recent report from Gallup states that in order for millennials to feel engaged and focused at work, our work must have meaning. We want to work with a mission and a purpose, but unfortunately, it can be hard to find a job directly out of college that works this way. So battling this conflict between a craving for fulfillment and going to a job that might not necessarily give you this sense of fulfillment on a daily basis leads to this lost and conflicted feeling that many of us feel coming straight out of college. My solution is to seek out this sense of purpose on your own. Now, during my time at Temple, me and a group of friends started a collective known as Only Elite Matters. It began as a way to just throw more dynamic and interesting college parties, but it soon evolved into a full-scale digital media organization. It was during this time that I picked up a passion for photography. It began as just someone had to take pictures at our events, so I volunteered, and eventually it segued into booking graduation shoots on the weekends and coordinating full-scale editorial photo shoots. OEM began hosting photography meetups throughout the city, and I was able to connect with photographers, models, stylists, makeup artists, dozens of very talented creatives in the growing Philadelphia creative community. Now, fast forward to the summer directly after graduation. Honestly, it felt like I didn't even have enough time in the day to think about photography. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, take a quick nap, take a shower, make some dinner, get ready for bed, and just start the cycle over the next day. I felt myself starved creatively. I needed an outlet, and organizing spreadsheets all day just wasn't doing it for me. So I decided to consciously make the decision to focus more on developing my passions and, studying the work of big-name photographers that came before me, learning new editing styles. This eventually led me to a desire to shoot more, which led me to a desire to continue expanding that photography meetup concept we had founded back in college. And by the beginning of 2019, Philly Create had become the largest creative meetup in the city of Philadelphia. So I had realized just how relieving it was to put so much time and energy and effort into something and be rewarded with that fulfilling sense of purpose afterwards. As a result, I feel as though work cannot be your sole focus in life. You need these passion projects to keep you inspired and energized throughout the day, while going from work to home to work to home will just cause one to burn out much more quickly. And for my third and final lesson, make it a priority to keep your network alive. Now, to be honest, this has been one of the biggest struggles of my post-grad career thus far. Just after graduation, a lot of people tend to move back home or relocate to new states for new jobs or even start pursuing a second degree. And all of these new obligations and distance and time constraints means that you have to navigate your friendships a little bit differently. It can be hard to maintain a friendship when you're not seeing your friends every single Tuesday and Thursday for an hour and a half. But recently, I made the decision to make it more of a priority to maintain my social life and stay connected with my friends, and here's why. Now, do you remember that fancy ad agency job I talked about back in lesson 1? Well, one Monday, I walked into my office back in March for one of my Monday morning meetings, only to find out that every single department in my company, mine included, would be cut in half due to a loss in clientele. Just like that. Just like that, I found myself back home just holding a box of my stuff, and suddenly I was back to square one. So I spent the next few days just hunting through job opportunities, frustrated. It felt like there was no way to win this adulting thing. Why wasn't the foundation for my future beginning to fall into place like they said it was? What was I doing wrong? So one day, I hopped on the phone with an old friend of mine from college. She had just moved to a new state for a new job opportunity, and this was the first time we'd gotten to talk in months. So the first thing she said to me was, "How's things with you, Dylan?" I didn't even know how to respond, so I settled with, "To be honest, this adulting thing is really, really tough." And she agreed immediately. The next thing I knew, we were venting and going back and forth trading horror stories from the past few months of our lives. She told me about her new struggles with her landlord and trying to navigate in a new job where she knew nobody. And I told her about losing my job recently and trying to figure out what my next steps were going to look like. And at some point, she said something that really resonated with me and kind of changed my perspective on my whole situation. She said, "In reality, no one really knows what's going on." Now, oddly enough, this was comforting for me to hear. The last time I had felt that sense of communal stress was back in college. When you're in the student center at 3 a.m. studying for a midterm you have the next day, there's 50 other students around you doing the exact same thing. But once you graduate and enter adulthood, it seems like you're supposed to just figure out the rest all on your own. Now, nobody necessarily says anything, so you would never really realize, but what I began to understand was that, in reality, everybody was still just trying to figure it out. Even those who had been out of college for 5, 10 years were still struggling with that same what now feeling that I found myself facing at the time. And I realized that although so many people decide to suffer in silence, it's important to remember that you don't have to go through it alone. Which brings us back to today, one new job and a year's worth of experiences later, and I was inspired to give this talk to provide the level of clarity and transparency I wish I had before I received my diploma. Now, graduation is more than just finish school, get a job, start your future. It's an emotionally complex transition that comes with its own set of challenges. But if there's one thing I want you guys to leave with today, it's this. There's no way to win adulthood, ever. As you continue to grow and continue to evolve in your life, there's constantly going to be new challenges and obstacles and difficulties that make you feel like you have no idea what's going on. It's important to just embrace that feeling. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. That's what adulthood is. Thank you.